At the Thanksgiving feast, my uncle slipped away from the table, claiming he needed to use the restroom, and returned silent after 7 minutes. He resumed his seat in front of a full meal, leaving it untouched for the remainder of the evening. He didn't finish his drink, nor did he offer any more jokes. He remained motionless, bearing an expression I had seen before one of a man who suddenly realizes he has been standing on a trapdoor all along and just heard it creak. This was the instant everything shifted. However, to comprehend the transformation that occurred when Prescott waverly searched for my name online and emerged altered, you need to go back approximately 45 minutes prior. To the moment my spouse stood up from the table at Thanksgiving and informed our entire family that I had lost my job and was living off her earnings. She did not mutter this secret. She didn't discreetly disclose it in the kitchen like one does when sharing private, potentially awkward details about loved ones. Instead, she broadcasted it, right amidst the sweet potato casserole at a table laden with turkey, in front of 9 individuals who had spent the preceding hour scrutinizing me. When she concluded, they erupted in laughter, not an obligatory, awkward chuckle, nor a sympathetic giggle from a family trying to be considerate. It was an unreserved, genuine, joyful laugh that echoed throughout and left no room for doubt about the joke's success. I remained seated, fork in hand, saying nothing. My name is Harlan Voss. I am 43 years old. Born and raised in Dayton, Ohio, where my father was a parts machinist and mother worked at the school cafeteria. I built everything I possess from scratch, with no financial aid from family, no influential contacts, and no security net to fall back on. I've experienced the ordeal of munching ramen at a desk past midnight, drained financially after investing all capital into a potential software contractor who could make or break my company. I know the feeling of watching my bank balance plummet below the terrifying threshold, yet persisting to work on, as ceasing isn't part of my construction. 3 months prior to that Thanksgiving dinner in Scottsdale, Arizona, I sold my second venture, a data infrastructure firm I nurtured from a team of 4 employees in a rented office above a dry cleaner on Henderson Road in Columbus, to a multi-state team of 61. A figure that left my lawyer, a seasoned woman who's handled countless deals and witnessed diverse outcomes, silent for a lengthy moment before cautiously asking, "Harlan, are you aware of the implications this has for you?" I was well aware. I too realized I hadn't disclosed the entire truth about the incident to my wife, a conscious decision made by me, and I was preparing to confront this fact in a highly visible manner. Prior to proceeding, consider subscribing, share an instance where someone underestimated you, and like the video if you find the narrative engaging. Let's rewind to Scottsdale. 4 years ago at a business conference in Denver, I encountered Cecile Waverly on a consumer branding panel. She articulated how mid-sized companies tend to misrepresent their identity to the market, creating lasting issues over time. And she did so with precision and wit that conveyed genuine intellect rather than just appearance. She captivated the audience without actively seeking to dominate it, which is a more challenging talent. Afterward, I approached her, and she acknowledged knowing me by saying, "I've heard of you. You had sold your logistics firm. Whether through thorough research or simply exceptional memory retention, this caught my attention. We were in a long-distance relationship for 8 months, her based in Phoenix and me divided between Columbus and Denver. Eventually, she requested that I move to Scottsdale. Despite my dislike of the desert heat, I was smitten with her. I sold my condo in Columbus, purchased a house close to the McDowell Mountains, whose views almost made the heat tolerable, and relocated. There are 2 key aspects about Cecile that you should know. She was exceptionally intelligent, well aware of this fact, and during the initial years of our marriage, her intellectual prowess invigorated me. She oversaw brand and strategy at a mid-size marketing consultancy in downtown Phoenix, a firm that stood out due to its employees' genuine commitment rather than just focusing on quarterly targets. She was their top talent, aware of her abilities. I've never encountered issues with capable, self-assured women. I spent my childhood witnessing my mother manage our household and 2 part-time jobs with a level of organization that would have made her excel in my old profession, so competence in women seemed ordinary to me. However, complications arose post-selling the data infrastructure company I had been discreetly growing for 6 years. The business wasn't linked to my personal brand. Functioned under an organizational framework suitable for our institutional clients, namely large corporations seeking assurance of dealing with a corporation rather than an individual. Cecile was aware of this structure's broad outline but not its intricacies. She recognized I ran a business, understood it focused on data and systems, and knew it was profitable. What she wasn't privy to, due to my strategic omission in the initial stages of our relationship, was the extent of its growth, its worth, and eventual sale price. I had experienced past financial setbacks, not devastating ones. While I haven't lost faith in people due to a past incident, I have become cautious enough. There was an individual from my past, prior to Cecile, who altered her approach upon sensing money. Her conversation style and introduction methods shifted. I found a new, more practical use of myself, and once I recognized it, I couldn't ignore it. From then on, I developed the habit of withholding information until I knew someone's true character. It became second nature. By the time I comprehended Cecile in ways that truly mattered, her resilience, her interactions with service workers and strangers, how she handled admitting mistakes, we were already deeply entwined in each other's lives. The optimal moment for a comprehensive financial discussion never quite presented itself, and I had convinced myself, in the way we often do, that I would reach it eventually, and there was no immediate necessity to hasten it. After the company was sold, I entered a prolonged transitional phase without a salary or regular income, spending time contemplating the use of the sale proceeds and deciding what to create next. From an outside perspective, it might seem like I wasn't working at all, a situation that can gradually become one's reality if left uncorrected. Cecile didn't pay close attention, and this oversight occurred several months prior to the sale, which I was too preoccupied to notice. I should have discussed the entire situation with her and clarified things. I recognize this now, and while I don't use this as an explanation for my silence, I want you to understand why it persisted for so long as it affects the rest of the narrative. For years, vigilance over confidential matters turned into an inherent trait in my character. It operates subtly, whether I'm intentionally employing it or not. In the recesses of my mind, a subtle, observant presence kept tracking Cecile's discussions on money, social standing, and the possessions of those around her, what she had and what she lacked, her self-perception based on professional comparisons. I wasn't ready to share that data with her until I was absolutely sure about how she would handle it. Thanksgiving provided an answer more extensive than I had anticipated. The Waverly family convened annually at the residence of Garrett and Nadine Waverly in Scottsdale's McCormick Ranch, a district known for its winding streets passing through landscaped public spaces, and homes designed in the unique southwestern style that appears effortless yet is costly. The Spanish Mission Revival House of Garrett and Nadine displayed terracotta tiles and stucco walls painted like dried clay, with a rear pool reflecting afternoon light in a way that made one ponder why people chose desert living, despite personal doubts. Their prosperity was evident over the years. Garrett worked in mid-market commercial real estate development, amassing wealth gradually rather than making headlines, while Nadine operated an interior design firm specializing in clients attracted by Garrett's developments. Together, they had established a mutually reinforcing and resilient partnership. They exuded comfort as those who have never experienced discomfort might do. I had crossed paths with them on 2 occasions before the Thanksgiving in question. Twice I felt they were evaluating me subtly, with Nadine doing it so smoothly that questioning her actions would appear paranoid. She effortlessly incorporated every detail I mentioned into subsequent discussions, indicating she was attentive. That takes skill. Garrett, on the other hand, was more straightforward, forming opinions quickly and holding on to them for a long time, but he could change his mind if given reason. I found myself liking him more in our past encounters than he reciprocated. It was okay. The rest of the Thanksgiving gathering included Cecile's older brother Tanner, who sold HVAC equipment across 3 counties and possessed a good-natured bluntness that comes from closing deals for 20 years over ordinary lunches in nondescript conference rooms. Brianna, Tanner's wife and a diligent dental hygienist, was the most perceptive at the gathering, speaking less than usual, which, in my experience, often signified something significant. Paige, Cecile's younger sibling, and her spouse Devin, who worked in residential mortgages, seemed to have 3 go-to jokes that suggested he wasn't near retirement. At the opposite end of the table sat Prescott Waverly, Garrett's younger brother, aged 68. His hair was silver, a choice that denoted distinction rather than age. He had established a network of commercial laundry service contracts across the Phoenix metro area in the late 80s, expanded it significantly over 2 decades, and eventually sold it. Since then, he had engaged in advisory roles, selective consulting assignments, and the activities typically pursued by successful businessmen after retirement, expressing bold opinions about others' affairs and decisions confidently. He was the type of individual who sizes you up within the initial 30 seconds, then conducts himself according to that judgment for the rest of the evening. He isn't uncommon. Many Prescott Waverleys exist in the world, and most are not malicious individuals. They are simply people who have been accurate with their initial assessments, to such an extent that they no longer question the process. He swiftly approached me, shook my hand with a discerning grip, firm yet prolonged beyond casual politeness, the kind of greeting that is actually a probing gesture, and said, "So you're the one Cecil wed. What do you engage in?" I informed him I was between projects at the moment, which was accurate, and working on some consulting within the data sphere, also true. He gave a measured nod, signifying a man who was categorizing. "Data," he said. "Of what kind of data?" "Primarily infrastructure-related. Architecture for businesses surpassing their initial data infrastructure, as legacy systems hinder expansion and necessitate either rebuilding or extending solutions. Decision depends on the circumstance. Complexity often leaves many perplexed. He didn't comprehend entirely. That's acceptable, given the technical nature of the subject. He categorized me casually, then switched topic to discuss Scottsdale zoning code with Garrett. I observed his change and thought, understood, it was satisfactory. In my mind, I had no need to impress Prescott Waverley at that moment. The dinner was enjoyable. Nadine excelled in cooking, reflecting her serious, research-oriented approach to hosting as an art rather than a duty. Turkey was brined for 2 complete days. 3 pies were served pecan, sweet potato, and a creative cranberry apple blend that stood out as a recent innovation, impressing all. Tanner had brought back from his trip a California Pinot from a Sonoma Valley vineyard, which everyone found noteworthy to revisit. The conversation veered towards the anticipated topics of real estate prices and the future of Phoenix's market. A tale Tanner shared about an unconventional golf weekend in Sedona involving a rental car and an elk was met with interest, although its details were left undisclosed. Devin discussed his latest commission, displaying the usual dinner table showcase of professional success, which, while repetitive, was remarkably human. I found myself more observer than speaker at gatherings like this, preferring to watch and analyze the intricate patterns of social interaction, who yields authority, on what topics, and who maintains order in the hierarchy. At Prescott's informal helm, Garrett served as the stable foundation, while others assumed positions reminiscent of long-standing family dinners. We were approximately an hour into the meal. The main course was removed, dessert had not yet been served, and the table entered a post-meal stage where conversations became more relaxed, and individuals began to express themselves less cautiously than they might have earlier in the evening. Devin had been discussing his latest deal, a significant mortgage, a family from Portland moving to Scottsdale, a figure he wore a sense of pride for. Then, Tanner cracked a joke about the economy and those who'd been let go and were finding it challenging to adapt. It wasn't a cruel jest. Rather, it was the type of humor that resonates when everyone at the table is comfortably positioned to find economic hardship in others amusing from afar. I observed Cecil as Tanner concluded his joke. Her subtle adjustments indicated she was readjusting to the room, preparing for her next words. She casually commented, "We're coping well. I'm handling everything at the moment while Harlan decides on his next step." Her delivery was casual, similar to discussing a mundane detail like covering a friend's expenses during a tough month. A brief hush fell over the table, typical of when significant comments are made lightly. Prescott from the other end queried, "Figures out his next move?" His tone held amusement, neither hostile nor malicious, but playful, as if he had seen this specific situation unfold before. Cecil chuckled, a genuine and sustained laugh. You know that feeling. For a stretch, he had consulting assignments, but they gradually diminished. Such occurrences are not uncommon. I feel compelled to discuss my internal response when she spoke, as it influenced my subsequent actions. I didn't explode with rage, for that's not my nature. Instead, I became chilled, a response I have when something ambiguous suddenly becomes crystal clear. It's not like an epiphany, but more akin to recognition. You were already aware of something, and then the perspective subtly alters, and you realize your initial perception was accurate. I grasped precisely what Cecil was up to. She was manipulating the room's impression of herself by positioning me lower in the family hierarchy. She was using a sanitized, more manageable, socially convenient version of me as currency at her family gatherings, and the tactic was effective. Tanner chuckled first. Then Devon, relishing the chance to be the joke's target, following suit Paige, accompanied by her husband. Loudly, without hesitation, Prescott, deeming himself the judge of amusing and melancholic moments, chuckled. Pondering his next step, Prescott repeated, echoing something amusing to him. He cast a glance at me across the table. I returned his gaze, maintaining an expressionless face. Tinkering with some ideas, I responded. Ideas, he replied, employing the tone adults use to validate a child's words without genuine consideration. More relaxed laughter echoed. Familiar laughter. The laughter of a group that feels they have grasped the situation. Showing discomfort, Garrett reached for his wine. Nadine, gracefully, filled glasses with calculated precision, managing the room's atmosphere. Brianna remained silent, fixing her gaze on the table, a fact I observed and recorded. Cecile similarly said nothing, avoided eye contact, neither correcting nor addressing anything. She joined in the room's laughter, grasped her wine glass, and moved on to another topic. Approximately 10 minutes later, I mentioned needing fresh air, exited through the kitchen, and found myself on the back patio where the tranquil pool glimmered under the November twilight, casting long, golden streams of light from the windows. Standing there for a few moments, I felt the crisp Scottsdale air that characterized November evenings, not cold like Ohio winters, but thinner than summer's heat, with definite edges. Weighing my options, I considered returning to clarify, privately addressing Cecile about her behavior, letting it slide for the evening, or handling it at home. Instead, I chose to go back to the table, enjoy dessert, and allow the situation to unfold naturally. This final choice wasn't passive. I wish to clarify that point. Let me be clear, it was an active move, one rooted in the same discernment I have consistently employed during every crucial business negotiation. When the opposing party discloses their intentions prematurely, you remain patient. You don't rush to contradict them. You keep your cards close. You observe. You gather information until you comprehend the entirety of the situation at hand. I returned indoors. The pies were displayed. The coffee was satisfying. Prescott was dominating a conversation about a development project near Tempe Town Lake, discussing a mixed-use complex and countering permitting issues. Everyone listened intently, as one does when the most vocal individual in the room is speaking. Few noticed that I was scrutinizing Prescott specifically, deciphering the confident air of a man who has accurately assessed me and shifted his focus to more captivating topics. After Prescott declared he needed to go to the restroom, he was absent for around 7 minutes, noticeable without appearing like I was timing it. When he returned, there was a change in him. He hesitated behind his chair briefly before sitting down, not long enough for others to notice but sufficient for me to. His hand lingered on the chair's back, and his gaze shifted to me, an expression I identified quickly due to my own experience in business settings upon receiving new, impactful information. He settled down slowly, scrutinizing his plate without touching his fork. I remained silent, finishing my coffee as Devon discussed the pecan pie. I observed Prescott's immobility from the corner of my eye and waited. He looked at me again, then at his uneaten pie and untouched wine glass. Upon returning from the bathroom, he seemed different, a change noticeable even if unidentifiable by others. The atmosphere grew tense as our conversations became stilted. Paige inquired about his advisory work, to which he responded terse, leaving out his customary elaboration. Nadine gave him a probing look, but he shook his head slightly, indicating a discussion for later. He left earlier than expected, claiming an early morning. He hugged Nadine and shook Garrett's hand, but when approaching me, he extended his hand and said with caution, "Nice meeting you, Harlan," in contrast to the easy, somewhat patronizing warmth he had exuded previously. "Nice to make your acquaintance," I uttered. I gripped his hand longer than usual. He reciprocated with a subtle nod, conveying hidden messages. He ambled towards the exit. I observed him depart. Subsequently, I concluded my coffee. In Cecile's vehicle, as we descended and Phoenix lights adorned the landscape beneath us and soft music played, she affirmed the dinner was successful. She exuded contentment, the type resonating from someone managing a social gathering effectively. I inquired, "Was it indeed?" She looked at me. "You're subdued." I admitted exhaustion, which she acknowledged without pressure. We continued our journey, accompanied primarily by music. That evening I remained awake for an extended period, not distressed. I am not a person who remains awake in distress. Rather, in the quiet vigilance that emerges when I'm pondering something. I recollected Prescott's expression upon his return from the bathroom. Reflected upon Harland Voss based on his findings. I was aware of the hidden details about him, and I knew that with a search engine and 7 minutes, anyone could uncover sufficient information to drastically alter their perspective on him. Considered Cecile's words, her silences, and what it meant that she constructed a public persona of me using incomplete knowledge, employing it for social advancement without hesitation. I deliberately avoided discussing my finances as I wished to learn about her without such context shaping her perception of me. Got my answer at the Thanksgiving table in Scottsdale, Arizona, over sweet potato casserole with California Pinot. The response was not what I had anticipated. The call came 3 days later, while I was in my home office working on a proposal for an advisory project with a logistics group based in Tempe. My phone displayed a number that was almost unfamiliar, Prescott Waverly. I let it ring twice, then responded, "Harland." His voice was dissimilar to the Thanksgiving gathering. The authority remained, but the casualness was absent. He sounded measured and composed. I hoped I wasn't intruding, not at all. A brief pause. I wanted to express my apologies for certain remarks made at Thursday's dinner. They were based on false assumptions. I waited, allowing the silence to persist. "I researched you," he admitted after I had left. In the car, even before leaving the neighborhood. "I had a feeling something like that was happening," I acknowledged. Another pause, this one longer. "The data infrastructure company sold in September, yes, that was yours. And the logistics firm prior to it, the one in Columbus, indeed, that was also yours." I could hear him breathing, slow and calculated. "Harland," I admitted, I made a spectacle of myself at my brother's dinner table. "You were working with the information available to you," I said, and meant it sincerely. I harbor no persistent grudge against individuals who err in judgment based on inadequate data. It's just being human. However, what I consider unforgivable is the deliberate use of someone else's perceived inferiority as a social weapon. That was Cecile's choice. Prescott had merely seized an opportunity she presented and exploited it. There's a distinction. "For my entire life," Prescott commented after a pause. "I've taken pride in accurately reading people within the first 30 seconds. I know who I'm interacting with. It served me well in business, but it misled me terribly on Thursday. It happens. I'd like to have lunch." He continued, seriously, not casual chit-chat about family matters. "I'm collaborating with a team aiming to modernize data systems for a hotel property collection. We manage 12 properties, a mix of full-service and limited-service hotels, all running on outdated technology that is now hostile to expansion. And I believe the strategy they've been following is fundamentally flawed." He asked me to take a look at it. I informed him I'd check my schedule. 2 weeks later, we had lunch at a tranquil, thoughtful restaurant on the north side of Camelback Mountain that offered unpretentious service and authentic food. He was unlike the Thanksgiving version in every significant aspect. Attentive, open to guidance, genuinely curious instead of seeking validation. The issue he presented was legitimate and more intricate than initially stated. Legacy property management systems entwined with accounting platforms, entwined with booking infrastructure. The entire setup had solidified, built around business decisions that made sense a decade ago and now functioned as structural hindrances to their current endeavors. It was exactly the kind of challenge I found intriguing. We conversed for approximately 2.5 hours. At the end, he inquired, "May I ask you something? Does Cecile know about your involvement?" "No," I replied. He fell silent momentarily, then Cecile revealed what she said during Thanksgiving. She admitted what she thought was truthful. It's crucial to grasp this. She wasn't deceitful. Rather, she chose a fragmented image of me that I had allowed to remain incomplete, and the version of me that aligned with the narrative she was narrating at that table was more appealing to her. The issue isn't the lie. The problem lies in the preference. Prescott glanced at me for a moment. "Dealing with this is harder than a lie," he said. "Absolutely," I concurred. This conversation with Cecile took place on a chilly Saturday afternoon in mid-December, 3 weeks after my lunch with Prescott. We were on the back patio, as we often were during Scottsdale winters when the temperature was pleasant rather than harsh. The McDowell Mountains appeared low and brown in the distance, and the sky bore that distinctive southwestern hue that seemed artificially intensified. I decided to disclose everything fully, and I did so. Over the past 6 years, our data infrastructure company transformed in various ways, shaped by the team we assembled, our esteemed institutional clients, and the specific sale price and terms. I detailed the ownership structure and my rationale behind its organization. The chronology of events was presented, aiming for clarity. Throughout this discussion, Cecile remained composed. Her intellect allows her to process information in a distinct manner compared to others. You can observe the subtle shifts in her facial expressions as she reaches conclusions, verifies them, and subsequently integrates them. She comprehended my words, but more crucially, she grasped their implications for her actions during Thanksgiving. Upon conclusion, her initial response was, "Why didn't you share this with me earlier?" I responded, "I wanted to understand your identity before providing information that could alter your perception of me." "I've faced a similar predicament earlier, but I hope to avoid repeating it." She pondered for a brief spell. "And Thanksgiving, too. You utilized an iteration of me," I admitted, "an assemblage you formed from the accessible, showcasing it to your family for personal gain." They chuckled, and I allowed them their amusement. I hadn't anticipated such a reaction. "You didn't either, that much I understand. That's part of what I've been contemplating." The ensuing quietness, the distant mountains, the soft mechanical noises from the pool. "Prescott contacted you," she disclosed. It wasn't a query, she had deduced it. He did. What transpired in that conversation, he expressed remorse. Additionally, he discussed a professional conundrum he's been tackling and sought my viewpoint, which I provided him with. She eyed me with an emotion I couldn't fully decipher, a blend of shame and a profound contemplation, the kind that transcends this specific incident into the routines and desires that engendered it. "I've been sharing this with others, not just during Thanksgiving. To friends, colleagues, you were in limbo, and I took on that burden for now," she whispered. "After my last relationship's conclusion, I felt the need to be composed. With your reticence about the truth, it was convenient to spin a narrative that made me appear as if I was shouldering both of us." She paused, then added, "That's not an alibi." "No," I responded, "it isn't. But understanding the context is beneficial. I wish to disclose what actually transpired with this predicament, because this aspect holds the utmost significance, and it deviates from a familiar narrative pattern. I didn't escalate the situation. I didn't inform the family about the chain. I didn't orchestrate a second Thanksgiving-like disclosure. I have no affinity for theatrics. Theater caters to those seeking narratives that revolve around moments of realization, climaxes, and public reckonings. I desired something more prolonged than just a scene. Cecile sought therapy, an initiative I didn't propose. She inquired if I knew anyone suitable, indicating the gravity of her situation, to which I provided a suggestion. The therapist she met with in Phoenix was Dr. Sandra Aldridge, who specialized in addressing the kind of patterns Cecile recognized within herself. Her self-perception management, the harmful behavior stemming from status anxiety despite lacking malicious intent. Upon returning from a few sessions, Cecile appeared transformed, not merely fixed, but changed. There's a significant distinction, and it carries weight. In February, we dined with Garrett and Nadine at their residence in McCormick Ranch. The evening was uneventful, tranquil rather than dramatic, held over a meal Nadine prepared and wine Garrett had stored. I repeated the same details to Nadine, composedly, without demanding apologies but instead clarifying the facts. Nadine absorbed it as she does everything, thoroughly and with remarkable memory retention. Upon my conclusion, she stated, "I wanted you to be aware that I harbored reservations about the portrait we were presented. It seemed discordant. It often does when someone remains silent at a table. That's seldom an indication of surrender." At the end of the night, Garrett gripped my hand differently than he had in November. By spring, via the usual paths family information travels, gradually and fragmented through talks that begin with other topics, the correction had reached everyone present at the Thanksgiving table. At Easter, a smaller gathering at Garrett and Nadine's house, Tanner privately spoke to me, displaying the straightforward frankness that I had come to recognize as his characteristic trait. "I owe you one." He admitted he'd laughed inappropriately, feeling his actions were wrong. He stated it straightforwardly, without elaboration. I confirmed it was resolved, sincerely. "Devin hasn't brought it up, and that suits me fine. Devin is a unique individual." Paige sent a text to Cecile, which Cecile read out on the patio one evening. The important part was, I didn't fully grasp the situation. I apologize for my role in it. That was sufficient, more than enough. Brianna, Tanner's wife, who often said less but observed more, confided something to Cecile privately that I learned secondhand. She said she'd sensed at the table that the story wasn't right. She made this observation in a factual tone, as if everyone else had simply been slow to catch on. Since our lunch near Camelback Mountain, Prescott and I have met 5 times professionally. The hotel portfolio predicament proved far more intricate than initially presumed. Hidden integrations between property management systems and financial reporting tools, undiscovered until now, necessitated a detailed investigation comparable to archaeological work, requiring patience and an open mind to avoid preconceived notions about the ideal resolution before fully comprehending the issue at hand. Progress is ongoing in our efforts to untangle this complexity. My initial impression of him from Thanksgiving was misleading. His business acumen proved more substantial than his persona suggested, a suspicion that grew as distance increased from that evening. Men who construct tangible assets often conceal deeper complexities beneath their family dinner facades. During our third encounter at his office near Kierland, he made a statement that still resonates with me. He admitted, "I've been questioning why I assessed you so swiftly. After 4 decades in business, I should know better than to make hasty judgments based on superficial cues." Despite being given potentially misleading information, I proceeded with confidence and followed through. I commented, "The facts provided made your decision straightforward," to which he agreed. "However, I've been presented with incorrect data in the past but managed to spot it," he added. This time I didn't question the information, possibly because Cecile's story supported a belief I was already predisposed towards, that a man lacking specific table success likely hadn't built any. This is a bias I should be more vigilant about identifying. It's an admission of my fallibility. I concurred with his self-analysis. He expressed his concern. "What bothers me the most is that I didn't question the information until it conflicted with the data. I should have questioned it at the table itself, based on your demeanor in the room." "How was my demeanor in the room?" he pondered. "You carried yourself as someone who had nothing to prove," he concluded. However, I misinterpreted this as passivity. In reality, it wasn't. The concept I've been contemplating since Thanksgiving in Scottsdale, the thought that resurfaces when I reflect on what transpired and its implications, is this. The facts I concealed from Cecile were intended to safeguard me. From past encounters, I understood that specific details could alter people's perceptions, and I desired to be recognized for who I am rather than what I possess. This aspiration seems justifiable. Navigating a world that often deems you instrumental calls for such considerations. However, my caution escalated beyond its intended purpose. Instead of providing protection, it transformed into withholding information, thereby creating a void that Cecile subsequently filled with the readily available and practical version of me. The narrative she spun at Thanksgiving wasn't a fabrication. It was simply the truth she perceived. The tale unfolded due to my silence, and she opted to disclose it at the most inconvenient time, place, and in front of an unsuitable audience. This much is indisputable. My silence had set the stage, yet her decision was still hers. I've come to understand that privacy doesn't equate to obscurity. They might seem alike from a distance, but they are distinct concepts. Privacy entails selecting what to reveal and when, contingent on the bond's capacity and trust established. On the other hand, opacity involves erecting barriers around oneself, assuming those beyond it will patiently wait without attempting to fill in the voids themselves. I was opaque while believing I was private. It was at the Thanksgiving table that I learned the distinction. Cecile and I remain together, but we are no longer the same people as we were at that dinner. Now we're better equipped with truth, both of us, a fact that was initially discomforting and which I wouldn't swap for a less challenging version of our marriage. The house by the McDowell Mountains remains ours. The pool still basks in the afternoon sun. Next Thanksgiving will inevitably arrive, as it always does, and will likely be seated at Garrett and Nadine's table, alongside Tanner and Brianna, Paige and Devin. His golf jokes, and Prescott, now silver-haired and self-assured, no longer gazing at me the way he did that first November. Instead, he will look at me as he does today, from across a hotel portfolio problem we're solving together, with the distinctive respect of a man who misjudged a situation and had the courage to admit it. Such respect is worth more than the demonstration of an apology. It's stronger than any theatrical scene. It's what endures.